we continue our discussion on mental health and how it relates to us as men. We had a very enriching discussion a few weeks ago on the topic. And as a result of that discussion, we decided that we actually need a part two. So here we are to continue on what is it we can do and how we can put simple steps in place to improve our mental health and to support the ones we love. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite Shane to give us a brief 5 minutes because he's going to recap the last session from the presentation. Then we will move to Lariston, who will be sharing his views. Shane?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. It's good to be back here. We did this about 3 weeks ago, and it was a very robust discussion. And ironically, I think we had more women in the room than men. So that tells us something that women are also invested in our mental health. So it's important for us to recognize that. And for the women that came back, welcome. And we definitely appreciate your support. I think it's important for us to explore what mental health is as it relates to manhood and men, because we believe that traditionally men really don't talk. We have issues expressing our emotions. However, I do believe that if a space is created for men, a safe space is created for men, that they will feel comfortable expressing themselves, validating themselves, and also supporting each other. I think it's important for us to realize that we coexist in a culture where there's a lot of emphasis is put on what is masculinity and what's manhood, and none of that correlates with sensitivity. You know, I think that sensitivity and vulnerability is our superpower, especially for men, because if we're able to be sensitive, we're able to be vulnerable, it says that we're willing to learn, we're willing to listen, we're willing to think of a new way of doing things, and really allowing ourselves to show up as human. I think when we put such emphasis on masculinity and manhood, I think it dehumanizes our male experience, because it tells us that we're not allowed to be. we're not allowed to be human. And I think it's important to stress that, because when we put forward these qualities and we participate in this way of thinking, we are presenting a role model to young men and young women, our sons and daughters, because they will do exactly what we do. So we want to very early have conversations about what humanity is, what manhood is, and really encourage young men to have a sense of respect and reverence for women. I think if you pass by any high school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you hear the discourse among young men and women, and the names they use and the way they project themselves and present themselves. So I really think that maybe having these discussions at a younger age, probably in primary school, will be very helpful to how we encourage young men to present themselves, and how do we prepare them for manhood. So I want to stop talking now and open up the floor to Mr. Chow to add what he has to add to the discourse. And thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, Richard and Shane. I think this is the second time I'll be meeting Shane via this virtual platform. So it's always good to share such a space. And it is men and mental health, coming from a social work standpoint, especially in parenting, is very important. What we've recognized throughout the Caribbean, more so Guyana, and this is coming from my experience working at the Child Protection Office, we have found that there is some discord when it comes to parenting and men. Interestingly, there's high level of men who want to be a part of their child or children's lives, but there are various, I will say, various components within the family and externally that seeks to prevent such, and it put men at a place where there's a struggle, and it provides that sort of impression as if the system has not been put in place for men, but rather it's a woman's world, contrary to popular beliefs that it's a man's world. Um, I am happy that we have such a platform also, just starting off from a conversation, because it is difficult sometimes for men to be open and to share openly without being ridiculed, without being seen less of or less as. And so it provides that opportunity where as men, you're able to understand that you are valued, you are, we are here to hear from you. You are not just human, but you're one with worth, with value, and therefore your mental health is important. When it comes to mental health, and I think Dr. Shane can also agree with me that in the Caribbean, we tend to see mental health not as a part of us, or it's not something that affects men. It's something that is isolated. And it's difficult sometimes when we speak to parents, and this is talking about men, in terms of how do you deal with the pressures of society? How do you deal with the issue of the home and the demands of the home? Combine that with the system and everything else out there. What are your coping mechanisms? And we find that a lot of men uses alcohol as their coping mechanism. And while it is seen as a coping mechanism, it's not a healthy coping mechanism, because it internally, it affects them as a person, and it also affects the home. It affects the cohesion and the wholesomeness of the family. And until the family has a kind of a breakdown, then is when the alcoholism is being addressed. So it is my hope that from this and many other ventures like this, through the Men Empowerment organization, that men are able to understand that they too have a place, they too can be heard, and they too can also find healthy coping mechanisms to deal with, and to understand that they are not alone, that they are not in an isolation, that is not women alone that has to deal with these issues, but men as well, and we can help collectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Darstan, for raising those points. I'll let Shane, I see you're unmuted, so I'll let you continue.
I was just saying that I think this is a good place to open up the room for other people to comment or add value to what we're saying, or just ask questions.
Yes, Christine, you may unmute.
Hi, everybody. Good night. This is my second time tuning in, and my name is Christine Samaru, and I have an organization here in Guyana. It's called the Bradford Collective, and it addresses gender and environmental justice. And specifically with the gender aspect, a lot of it is gender-based violence from a women and girls perspective. So it's really great that you have this outlet for males. Last year on Men's Day, we had a conversation similarly on mental health. And I'm really interested in any kind of collaboration, partnerships, because as a woman, I can only speak on, my perspective and the way I see things and the issues I face as a woman. But I really feel like in order for us to have a conversation collectively and for changes to happen, you have to engage both sides. So I would definitely love to learn about ways we can collaborate and, like support each other's work.
Thank you, Christine. So what I did, I just placed the organization email in the chat for persons who may want to get in contact with us. It's men592guy@gmail.com. men592guy@gmail.com.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Welcome. So the space is open for persons who may have any questions, anything they would like to add to the topic before Shane continues.
But it would be interesting to get some feedback from the other men that are present here. What have their experiences been like in not only in just their own lived experience, but their experience in working with men, especially men of marginalized communities? So we have 9. Okay, someone just raised their hand. Go ahead, Mr. Nelson.
Good evening. Before I start, let me apologize for the background noises. There's a lot going on in my background. But let me just add to the conversation. I think a lot of that was shared is so important. But one of the things that I've noted being a consistent, especially dealing with men and the topic of mental health, is the role of men in society being challenged. And let me explain what I mean. A lot of times, men come and they say, you know what, I'm not respected in the home. I'm not respected in my space of work, and this sometimes pose a challenge on their mental health. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed, right? And I would love to hear you speak a bit more about the potential of a man's mental health being attacked based on how he is treated, whether it relates to being respected in the whole in society, in that regard. So that's my contribution.
Thank you. I think it is very important for us to explore that topic. If we look at just the examples of what dads get on Father's Day and what moms get on Mother's Day, that definitely tells us where we stand in the family structure. And I do believe that because we are not socialized to emote and be emotional about how we feel, that we don't feel that we have agency over ourselves or over the family to share our feelings. In my experience with men's group, what comes out of it, the core of it, and Mr. Troy could probably contribute to this, is that men feel devalued and unappreciated because they're expected to be a great husband, great dad, great everything, and go out and bring in the bacon. And even when they do those things, there's not a lot of support for them. Because if you think of for those of us that are fathers, I think when you become a first-time dad, it is extremely anxiety provoking. And especially if the child may not be unplanned or you're not in a financially secure space to provide for this child, that can be extremely anxiety provoking. And who do we talk to about that? If at 25, I had my first child, and I I was lucky. I have my twin brother to talk to, and I have 9 other brothers to talk to. But our parents kind of encouraged us to have those conversations and be supportive of each other, support to and for each other. But there are many men that don't have those supports. I had preview to a conversation not too long ago about a young man who doesn't have a job, really doesn't have a place to stay, telling his girlfriend, "I can't wait to get you pregnant." And for him, that was his way of exerting power over her and the dynamic. But really having a conversation with that man and letting him know, you don't have a job. You cannot afford a child right now. And maybe there are things that you should do in terms like probably go back to school, go to college, start your career before you even consider getting a child. Because once that child comes here, it's your complete responsibility. But going back to the conversation about us not feeling validated, I think it's also incumbent upon us to have those conversations in our spaces with other men, with family members, and with our families. Because remember, the society that we were brought up, everybody looks up to dad, but where does dad get the support? Who supports him? And I really believe that having these conversations with both men and women in the room, like the young lady was talking before about doing collaborations. I think that is important. It's important for men to have their time. It's important for women to have their time. But for relationships to work, you have to bring them together and start a new project and a new way of how do we relate to each other. We're very good at relating to our own gender. I think it's easy. But when we're able to think of a new paradigm, and it really demands us to really think outside the box of how do we relate to our wives and our partners when we feel insecure, when we feel that we have no support, and who provides that space. So I think it is very important that we're having this conversation where we can start providing those spaces and working in collaboration with women's group to get everyone together to have a new conversation.
Well, just to piggyback a bit on Dr. Shane's perspective, I am one that loves to make referrals to groupings, to platforms, to organizations that fosters or that provides a safe space for individuals based on the circumstances. I think another way in which men can, if I can use the right word, reclaim or to feel a part of, is also having that self-reflection and understand that, okay, I am not where I want to be. I am not having, I'm not within that space. I'm not equipped with this necessary skill set, to be honest with oneself. Because that's where we need to start first, because we can't, go around the place thinking as if we know it all, we have it all. None of us here who is, on this platform has all the skill sets needed. All right. And so it is for us to reach out and to connect. Now, we can always do so in an informal setting, because I think when it comes to men, we relate easy when it comes to informal settings, at a cricket game, at a football game, just random conversations. And then, when it gets a bit touchy, then it's when you may never know, the person may come up at the end of the conversation and say, man, you know, why you talk something that let we reach up again and, you know, I got something to discuss. It is also important for other men to understand that there are men out there who are struggling and needs that support. Because if you're going to shun and be like, man, you gotta put your foot down, you gotta be, you know, you gotta be the man in the family. Now, that for that individual may sound different. It may be as if that individual should now be authoritative, use violence to reclaim their position, right? And so it is to have that place where you can say, all right. So, because truth be told, there are some fathers that are exceptional. There are some men who are playing their roles, are positioned within their families, not necessarily because they would have had the opportunity to, but because they have sought certain avenues and maybe had open conversations and recognized for themselves, sorry, that there's a place that I wish to be as a father, as a husband, as a brother, as a son, and make those positive connections. Not everyone is brave enough to do so. And so it is for those of us, brothers, the brotherhood, to recognize, to observe, and to reach out. And in doing so, we are able to educate, we are able to share. We can have, and it's interesting that Dr. Shane brought up the whole comparison of Father's Day and Mother's Day. And generally in society, it is that view that a man has everything and there is nothing that he lacks. And his role, and this is something that I've been fighting teeth and tongue with clients with as it relates to support and the functions of the family and where each person functions within the family. Because if we don't understand our roles within the families and the functions that we bring within the family, we are not going to understand that it is like a factory. Each person has to do with their stuff in order to help the family. All right. We have the push and pull factor as it relates to economic support of the family. It is the man's duty to provide by all means necessary, but yet still we have a man who is going out there looking for a job, not being, you know, having luck in his sight to find one, but he's still trying, but you're still going to say he's a nutty.
Mm-hmm.
You're still going to say that, you know what, I don't know, you're a waste of space. I shouldn't even call you a man, you're a manatee. Now, these emotional abuse, of which we do not recognize, puts the man at a place where he, to ease or to alleviate that abuse, is to leave the family, is to walk away. But rather to open to have that conversation to say, honey, baby, whatever word you want to say, how do we get through this together? How can we work together? What needs do you need? And it also stems also from how some boys are being parented. Because in the home in itself, the man is expected to do so much and to look at masculinity in a stereotypical way, instead of understanding that masculinity is just beyond that, what is entrusted on us from a patriarchal standpoint, and to understand that we need to learn to be a team player. We need to be groomed as team players and not in isolation, right?
But to add to that, I think our religion And Christianity plays a big part of that, where the male is empowered to lead the family and he may not have leadership skills. So if we empower him to be a partnership to his wife, his spouse, his partner, that can also be, that could be supportive, because that way, if I'm leading, then I got to make all the decisions. But if I'm working in partnership, I have someone that I can depend on, and we can talk things out and support it. So we really have to look at all those constructs that impacts how we view masculinity and how we continue to move forward in those, under those constructs, and how do we reconstruct those things for younger men that are coming up, and let them know that being in a relationship is a partnership. That is very important for us to do that. So I think Mr. Chow and I have talked enough. We definitely would like to
I think
support
so.
and impact and input of others.
I was actually going to add, I often say to folks, you need to raise your boy child in a way for women to be the guys that you would be proud of. Be the type of man you would want to date. Be the type of man that you think have decent qualities. And when you're raising your son with those type of qualities, you raise your daughter to learn how to appreciate those qualities. Because what we have now is a generation where everybody is pointing fingers. Parents are saying it's not my fault. We make the children, we don't make them mine. Children are saying, well, if my parents had more time with me, I could have been better. And everybody is blaming everybody, but no one is taking up responsibility for what they should be doing. When we're speaking to our boy child, we need to let them be human. And we don't treat our boy childs like robots, or boy children like robots. Allow your son the time to cry. And we have this culture in society where you're trying to tell your boy child that an abusive father loves him. But when this child becomes an abusive teen, this is wrong for society. This abusive teen will grow to be an abusive young man who is going to want to have a relationship with somebody else's daughter. So if we're balancing society, we want to balance the bars, and we really want to be appreciative, we really need to start appreciating the roles, but also start training our children from an early age what it means to be a man, what it means to be a girl, and how to respect each other.
But to add to that, I also think that a question I always ask my male patient, I say, are you the man you want your daughter to date? And be honest about that. And it's a question that really throws them, because it really knocks them in the asses, because they really have to step back and think, am I the man? And I really think if we can pivot our therapy around that, like, are you the man you want your daughter to date? Or I ask myself, am I the man I want my daughter to date? That really gives us pause to really think. And it could be where we start a corrective course of action. In seeing ourselves as, okay, well, there are always things that we can work on. Even as a therapist and doing what I do, there's always room for us to improve. But we have to keep being honest with ourselves and being very, very raw about who we are and how we can seek the spaces and the support to help us be better fathers, brothers, just better men. I think it's important for us to have those open conversations.
Most definitely. So let's hear the views from some of the other participants on the call. We have Mr. Davis, Mr. Forrester. I know that Mr. Cairo is a bit occupied at the moment, so he's just listening, but we can get feedback from the others.
Okay. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much for the invite, Richard. And so far, based on what I've heard, I do really think that it's something that is not talked about as much. Mental health, especially when it relates to males. What I found, and I don't know if it's a question or it's a comment, but I think it's both mixed in. What I found based on the fact that I do have a good number of male mentees. And what I realized is even how society has trained men and what in the past men were looked as the provider. So they were the ones that ensured the house was provided for. And what I find is that this generation calls for a different type of male upbringing or men. I'm not sure if I prescribe to how the old person's generation, well, not my generation, my parents' generation, and even before then, how they, well, I've grown up with both my parents. I'm appreciative of even my father being present and all these things. But the fact that they more believed that once they provided for you, that was good. And of course, if you wanted to have an ear for an outlet, they were there, but not as I think that the roles from males are changing, and now society or even this generation, they're more, I wouldn't say in touch with their feelings, but they're more open about their feelings. And as a person who might have been from the older generation, it is something that I'm trying to work out, trying to unlearn. Even in my own relationship, I've always seen myself as someone who is not as emotional as most of other people. But what I'm learning too is that even my girlfriend, fiance, she also expects my openness and my sharing of my feelings, and that is uncomfortable for me. And I think it's something that I've learned even from the older generations. And it's something that me, that and I think men need to unlearn and try to change, adopt. Though I think it's very uncomfortable, as I mentioned. I think that that's it for me.
Thank you, Kadeem.
Well, change is incremental, not monumental. So you start and keep being courageous in terms of continue to share your feelings, but make sure when you're sharing your feelings, it's with someone that is invested in your emotional growth. That is very important, because I've seen men share their feelings and it's used against them at a later date, and that just allows them to just go back into their shell. So you have to be very clear. And even if that happens, you shouldn't allow yourself to go back into your shell, but you should see that as growth. Because growth takes time. We have to like unlearn all of the things that we've learned and relearn new things. And that will not happen overnight. So I encourage you to stay open to that process of growth and sharing your feelings, but also make sure the person that you share those feelings with values that and see that as your way of connecting better with them and of coming out of your shell more so. So it's important that we have the correct support we need as we bear our souls, which is very anxiety provoking, and it could make us feel very vulnerable, which is okay. But if the person you're with supports that and is invested in your growth, in your health growth, and your mental health growth, I think that will always make a difference.
And I think also when it comes to
Good night,
relationships,
everyone.
good night. No, go right ahead, Mr. Forreston.
Oh, you want me to go or you want to?
No, you go, because I haven't heard you for the night. So it'll be good to hear from you.
All right, good night, everyone. Again, I think it's rare. It's rare that a man would find a woman who would allow him to be as expressive as she would even claim that he should be. Because when a man becomes expressive, it's some women will not be able to cannot handle it. Because of training, it comes over as him being soft, even though sometimes she might say, you know, you got to allow yourself, you know, you can still. She has to know how to handle it. So it's good if a man can really find a woman who can really handle him expressing himself and being extra open. Why I really came on this to touch on also how things have changed, the expectations have changed on men. Sometimes it can be unfortunate, but it's a challenge for men now. Back in the day, the expectation was that men provide food and basically food, money, and so on. Now, things are changing where women can do that, right? Women can provide. And so some men would feel that, you know, that role has been taken from me. What do I have left? So the challenge now is to see your role as not just to provide. It's not just to provide food alone. You have to provide an ear. You have to provide, you have to be sometimes father and mother also, you know. You have to provide strength for your family. You got to provide guidance for your family. So women now who are now educating themselves and they're changing the expectations. So men cannot see the role as just to provide food only. So now when a woman can do that, what you are left to do? So our role is bigger. It's bigger than provide. And if we as men don't see our role bigger than that, we're going to feel like if society is doing something wrong with us, as if society has caused a woman to replace us. When it's not just to provide, it's bigger than that also. So it becomes a challenge now for men to see. I think I said, it becomes a challenge for men to see our role as not just to provide food alone, but it's bigger than that.
But I think that,
and that's my contribution so far.
Thank you for your contribution, but I really think that's the core of what we're talking about. As our roles have changed and or the expectations of our role has changed, how do we find that space where we can support each other as we move forward in making those changes? Because I think what you've explained is a very patriarchal view of manhood and the family structure. But if we see ourselves probably less as leaders and more as co-facilitators in the family dynamic, we will get that support we need. And because, you know, women are going out there and having jobs and contributing to their families. And whether you like it or not, economics is power. So whoever brings in the most money, it probably has more power in that family dynamic. But it gives us this opportunity to have these conversations about what are our expectations and how can we as parents, mother and father, how can we individually and collectively support each other as we navigate supporting a family.
I think this is where that initial conversation in relationships, as Mr. Davis mentioned, is imperative, it's pivotal. And this is because at the end of the day, the person that you are investing your time, your energy, your love, everything, this is the person that you want to have that family with. That's the person that you want to grow old with. This is the person that most of the beautiful things that life has to offer, you want to share with this person. And so it is very important that you can share. Now, I'm not saying in the initial part of your relationship, you're going to go out and be like, oh, this is me, da 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 da. Because this can be a red flag. It can detour, someone. But over time, by your, you spending time with that individual, there's something that you get to learn about that individual. And you of your own self will understand that time when you can have certain conversations that is not just petty boyfriend, girlfriend, love up stuff, but the deeper stuff. The stuff as it relates to when we have a family, what type of family setting do you like? Because we need to understand that when it comes to family cohesion, we come from two different plates. You can have a man coming from a single parent household. I do not know what it is to have a man present within my family. And I do not know the dynamics in which he should be playing as it relates to greasing and having that smooth flow within families. And my wife can come from an environment or a family where she came from a nuclear family where the father was very active, he was quite involved, and so she has certain expectations of me if we become, husband and wife, and we have that family. So when we have these open conversations in terms of what is your views and who do you see as a man, and what is your expectation for me as a man, then we can open up a more, I'm not going to say vulnerable, but a matching energy, to say, in terms of fostering better mental health amongst men. But also, it also diminishes some of the conflicts that we may experience moving forward in the relationship. Because we're having an open conversation, we are now communicating at a higher level, at a more in-depth level, then we are opening ourselves to be understood better. And by understanding each other better, we then create not a boss or a leader kind of mentality, but that open conversations from ever since in the relationship and our expectation, it then creates that pillar that Dr. O'Toole is talking about, the whole partnership, the whole support-based, that co-parenting, co-partnership within the relationship. So that person, that the husband, the man, no longer see himself as just a provider. I tend to say to men who say, but I'm paying child support for my child, and I've done what I've done. And I say to them, child support is an obligation. It does not mean you're involved. It doesn't mean you're supporting anything. You see it as an obligation. All right. And that in itself tells you of that father's perspective of his role, right? And so I think it's very important that we start these conversations, not just amongst men, but in our relations, whether intimate or not. All right. So that is my 2 cents as this.
Thank you. I'm also looking at the risk comment. I believe it's spaces like these that helps men to understand the full dynamic of his role and therefore embolden him to take up the responsibilities. Most definitely, we really need to have these conversations, and in listening to the feedbacks, I'm actually thinking one of the follow-up series that we can work out would be something along the line of relationship goals, where we speak on the expectations and we invite a few females to get perspectives from both sides so we can have a balanced conversation on those relationship expectations and how we navigate those waters. Because what you found many times is that we get involved with someone, but we have a lot of uncommunicated expectations on both sides. And we are expecting our partners to know those uncommunicated expectations. And when they're not met, it becomes a major issue. So I think that's maybe a 2, 3 part series that we may have to work around. Nonetheless, it has been a very enriching evening this evening. Conversation continues. We had persons with many present obligations, so our numbers really fell this evening. Nonetheless, we're going to continue and ensure that we push harder to get those numbers up. At this point, I'll zip a bit for any closing remarks from our facilitators, or if any one of our participants remaining would have anything they'd like to share.
Yes, Richard and team. Let me say I commend you for this. It's not I don't know what challenges you have or you had with this program, the program you're having for men. Because let me say, in a group I'm in, when Mother's Day was when it was Mother's Day season, we had all the nice encouragement for mothers and so on. And when the season, rightfully so, when the season would have passed and we were easing into Father's Day, in the group I saw kind of derogatory statements about men, right? So I had to mention, come on, it's approaching Father's Day time. Let's post messages that can encourage the men, So if it's rough on men because in many ways men are not being appreciated. And men, we don't really look for that appreciation. We just we just do what we're supposed to do. But it is, I think it's important that men are appreciated for those who will need it. So even this program that is on here, things like this, it really helps us as men to see what we expected to do and what good things we should expect for ourselves also. So yeah, that's it for now. Thanks to the guests.
Thank you for those
Well
remarks,
done.
Andre. Choi, closing remarks.
I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to share. It's always good to have these open spaces. Because of my work, I tend to like to talk about parenting because if I'm able to hit out on parenting and the roles and these kind of things, it makes my job a bit easier. Children are protected. Families are, wholesome. There's cohesion because when the family is broken down, it affects society, and from society it spell off into the country and then the world. So families are very important, and so men are very important part of the family as well. All right. And so thank you very much for the opportunity. I look forward to being a part of any other conversations that we may have in the future. I'll definitely try to encourage my men folk in terms of my work to be a part of it. I could use this as a counseling aspect for them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You know we will be calling on you in the future, so no worries. Shane,
Well, it's always a pleasure to be here and to be in this space where we can support and empower each other. So, uh, Richard, thank you for just creating a space where it's important for us to feel a sense of and support. So I want to say thanks and
we are not hearing you. I'm not sure. You're not muted, but we're not hearing.
Same here.
can you hear me now?
No audio.
Still not hearing.
How about now?
Something went wrong with your audio because you're
Okay,
not.
I'm
Yeah.
hearing you. But
You're back.
I'm
You're
hearing
back. You're back.
You're back.
you. Okay.
Here we are.
Maybe yeah. So I want to thank I want to thank you, Richard, for creating this space that we can meet and be supportive to each other and have these meaningful conversations. So if in the future you need me, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, as always, Shane. Again, we would have had this conversation, so you know that you will definitely be called on as well to support the network. We will continue to press forward to have these types of conversation. Not just we're using the virtual space because of the reach. Tonight we had persons from Suriname. Last week we had Trinidad, Grenada. So we're working on extending that reach. So that's why we're maintaining the virtual space. But in addition to this, we will be moving to having some in-person meet. We had some last year. We had some early up in this year, where we had discussions at bars, at barbershops. We're going back to those conversations as well, because we really need to meet men at spaces where they're comfortable. We need to take the conversations to them. A lot of times, organizations like this get started, but persons expect the participants to come to them, to their space. And if we want to be making some meaningful impact, we need to go where we can find men, where they're comfortable to share. And that's what we're about with the Empowerment Network. So thank you all for sharing your time with us this evening. We are looking forward for your support as we continue to grow the network and assist one meal at a time. So do enjoy the remainder of your evening and by extension your weekend. Until next time, take care.
Bye. Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a good
Good
one,
night,
everyone.
everyone.